Carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Thursday morning. It's January 16th, 2025. How many times will I say 2024? Don't you always do that? And when you're writing a check, you put in the old date from the previous year. Great to be back with you live. A big thank you to my amazing producer, Andrew Kruchek, and, of course, guest host and host of one of our programs, our local programs in Michigan, Epiphany, with Vanessa Denhagarmo. And Vanessa is a wonderful host and a wonderful guest host as well. We've known each other for many years. And we were street reporters together, and that's how we became friends. Anywho, thanks to Vanessa and Andrew for filling in. It's been a very busy week for me since I came back from the cruise because I'm so excited. My new book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, published by the one, the only EWTN, coming out in a few weeks. So, yeah, when you do a book, you have to put in the manuscript, but then there's so much work afterwards. It's not just writing the manuscript. You have to work with the editors. And in this case, because it is a huge guidebook, but it's small enough to fit in your backpack or your carry-on, by the way. We did it purposely like that. There's a lot of work that goes into it. We have maps, we have recipes, we have pictures, and now we're in the promotion process, so we're working really hard to get the word out. And I've been doing a number of interviews, plus I had a lot of legwork to do this week for the book. So hence the reason V filled in for me for a few days. But good to be back and good to talk about the things that matter most, as Al Cresta would always say. We are going to be talking with Father Mitch Pacwa for our Cultural Connections today, all about the situation in Israel. Now, yesterday we heard big news, breaking news about a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But a new update on this story is that apparently there are some snags now to the agreement because Israel, and we'll hear this in the news, delaying the cabinet vote. And we will tell you why, and we will discuss with Father Mitch Pacwa the impact of this and what the church says about this situation. And then we're also going to be taking a look at the pro-lifers who have been jailed by the Biden administration. Senior counsel for the Thomas More Society, Stephen Crampton, will be joining us, and we'll take a look at an effort that they're undertaking to have the new president, Donald Trump, who becomes the 47th president of the United States of America, of course, on Monday, the Inauguration Day, to see if he'll be willing to pardon the 21 pro-lifers that were targeted by Joe Biden's Department of Justice. So that is our program for today on a Thursday morning. Father Mitch Pacwa, of course, from EWTN for our Cultural Connections, and taking a look at the status of many pro-life cases that are going to be coming back into the news as we move into this new administration. Weather-wise, a lot of the country very cold, and that's not exactly a news flash because it is January. We do have elevated fire weather expected in Southern California, some dry conditions and locally gusty winds lingering into the remaining part of the day today. But the good news is that some stories are saying in some areas the winds have died down, so that's good. And there's a very cold air mass that remains in place across the East Coast. We have snow squalls that could lead to reduced visibilities and deteriorating road conditions. That's in the Rockies, and that begins actually tonight, and the Arctic air will spread south and east from the Rockies. That will continue through tomorrow and all the way through next week, so it could be a rough weekend weather-wise in that part of the country. It is a Thursday morning, and we're so glad you're listening to EWTN, 4 minutes past the hour. This program, Catholic Connection, is brought to you by our friends at House of Joppa, that website, houseofjoppa.com. Let's get started with the news on a Thursday. Well, as we mentioned, Israel and Hamas are in agreement, at least for now, on a ceasefire in Gaza and a hostage deal. During a confirmation hearing for Secretary of State, Florida Senator Marco Rubio said it is a positive move forward so far.
I'm hopeful that there is an agreement in place that will bring hostages back immediately in an exchange and in a three-phase plan that Secretary Blinken sort of has outlined over the last 24 hours.
However, as we mentioned at the top of the hour, Israel is now saying it's delaying a cabinet vote on that ceasefire with Hamas. A ceasefire and hostage deal, as we mentioned, reached yesterday, which would include Hamas releasing dozens of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Today, the Israeli Prime Minister's office releasing a statement claiming Hamas is reneging on the understandings and creating a last-minute crisis that is preventing an agreement. The news of that temporary agreement, at least for now, was announced by Qatar on Wednesday, as we mentioned, and State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller says he's still positive at this point.
We really do believe that a ceasefire unlocks the potential to massively surge humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and we have been working with humanitarian partners over the past few months to ensure that they are ready to surge that assistance as soon as the ceasefire is implemented.
Now, pending the vote, the deal is set to go into effect on Sunday, including Hamas releasing dozens of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. And Israel and Hamas, again, did have that agreement, but Middle East expert Dr. Ira Sheskin says it's mixed news for him, although he is happy that hostages could be released soon.
But I am concerned in the long run. We are once again showing Hamas that if they take hostages, they get what they want from it.
Cardinal Pietro Parolin saying in other news that the news of the announced gradual release of 553 Cuban prisoners is a sign of great hope at the beginning of this jubilee. Excuse me. Cuba has announced that it will release from prison 553 people convicted of various crimes. The decision was communicated to the Pope earlier this month in a letter from the Cuban president indicating the release of the prisoners was made in the spirit of the ordinary jubilee of 2025. Vatican News also saying it's significant, according to Cardinal Parolin, that Havana authorities linked the decision directly to the Pope in his appeal regarding the Jubilee, and then on several other occasions called for acts of clemency, as has often occurred during the Holy Year. The U.S. Supreme Court is deciding the fate of a Texas law which requires pornography websites to verify users' ages. Solicitor General Aaron Nielsen argued there's historical precedent.
In our history, we have always said kids can't come and look at this stuff.
But opponents arguing that if the Texas law is allowed to stand, it will start a wave of laws that chill free speech. They say the law does not include privacy protections, and that they argue it sets up also a permanent record that could be available to hackers. Daniel Martindale tells us a hillside home that survived the massive fire in Pacific Palisades is now destroyed after what appears to be a mudslide behind the property.
The home overlooking the Pacific Ocean is split in half and surrounded by mud and debris. It's unclear exactly when this happened, but it will likely be added to the total number of structures destroyed as a result of the Palisades fire, the most destructive fire in Los Angeles history. The latest estimates say about 10,000 structures have been lost to the fire, which started on January 7th.
2 people, meanwhile, behind bars on suspicion of starting fires outside of the areas impacted by the Palisades and Eaton fires. Los Angeles Police Chief Jim McDonnell announcing the arrest yesterday, saying both suspects admitted to arson earlier this week.
During the investigation, the suspect admitted to starting the fire because he liked the smell of burning leaves. The suspect was subsequently booked for arson.
That first suspect was accused of setting fire to a tree. He was also detained by a citizen before police arrived. Another arson suspect arrested in East Hollywood. About 4 hours later, police say the woman set multiple piles of trash on fire. Crews, however, are making progress on the L.A. wildfires as the winds died down over Southern California. Red flag warnings expiring for much of the L.A. area and allowing crews to get a handle on the 2 major fires. Now, at last check, the Palisades fire in western L.A., 21% contained, while the Eaton fire east of L.A., 45% contained. Over 80,000 people are still under evacuation orders. Governor Gavin Newsom saying hazmat crews from the EPA will begin clearing debris from burnt-out neighborhoods today. And a fire app is front and center with those fires in Los Angeles. Bree Tennis tells us details on what 2 million people downloaded since those fires broke out some 10 days ago.
The Watch Duty Fire app is staffed with 210 active and retired first responders, firefighters, dispatchers, and reporters. They monitor radio transmissions from the fire lines in real time and post it directly to the app. This is done 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in 22 states, including California. The app is free, but Watch Duty says they accept tax-deductible donations to keep the information flowing to the app.
And State Farm canceling its Super Bowl ad this year because of those wildfires in Southern California. The insurance company, which has faced criticism for not renewing some policies because of fire risk, is saying now it is instead going to focus on helping customers impacted by the fires that have left thousands of homes and businesses destroyed. A spokesperson said the company has already received thousands of claims. And Tammy Trujillo tells us a transportation department going after both Southwest and Frontier Airlines for not being on time.
The DOT announced Wednesday it's suing Southwest Airlines, alleging the carrier operated chronically delayed flights. The agency is also fining Frontier $650,000 for the same issue. This comes after the DOT levied a $2 million fine against JetBlue Airways earlier this month for similar allegations. In the lawsuit, the DOT says Southwest flights from Chicago Midway to Oakland, California, and from Baltimore to Cleveland arrived late nearly 200 times between April and August of 2022.
Flags are being raised to full staff at the U.S. Capitol this coming Monday to honor the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. Last month, Joe Biden ordering American flags lowered to half staff for 30 days in remembrance of the former President Jimmy Carter. On Tuesday, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson posting on X, flags at the Capitol would fly at full staff on Inauguration Day and then lowered back to half staff the following day to continue to honor President Carter. Brian Shook tells us nearly all Americans use products that involve AI.
A Gallup telescope survey found that an estimated 99% of Americans used at least one AI-enabled product in the past week, but about two-thirds didn't realize they were. Those products include streaming services, social media platforms, and weather forecasting apps. The survey also found that despite the widespread use, people's views of AI remain bleak. Majorities expect that AI will have a negative impact on American job opportunities, U.S. national security, and the spread of false information.
Well, TikTok is set to shut down in the U.S. this weekend if the Supreme Court does not intervene. Laura Westbrook reports that President-elect Trump, who once supported a ban, is now looking to save the social media app.
He is reportedly exploring an executive order to delay enforcement of the ban, giving the new administration more time to potentially cut a deal with a U.S. buyer.
A law passed last year requiring TikTok's owner to sell the platform U.S. operations by January 19th or face a ban, members of Congress citing national security concerns. And the FDA proposing a new rule aimed at helping shoppers make healthier choices in the new year. That proposed rule would require new labels on the front of food packaging showing information including whether a product has low, medium, or high amounts of sodium, saturated fat, or added sugar. It would complement the nutrition facts label that is already required on most packaged foods. And finally, in our news segment at almost 13 minutes past the hour on a Thursday morning, January 16th, 2025, I want to make sure I say that correctly, Sarah Lee Kessler tells us the FDA is banning, in another food-related story, red dye number 3 in food, drinks, and ingested drugs.
Wednesday's move comes more than 30 years after scientists found links between red dye number 3, which is made from petroleum, and cancer in animals. It's added to foods and beverages to give them an appealing cherry color. Manufacturers that use the additive are being given 2 years to remove it and reformulate their products. Red dye number 3 has been banned in California since October 2023.
It is a Thursday morning. We're so happy you're tuning in to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Check us out online at EWTN.com, of course. Coming up, looking forward to getting the perspective of the amazing and brilliant and so well-versed in Scripture and all things Catholic, of course, as well as the situations around the world, because he's traveled so much and spent so much time, especially in the Mideast. Our very own Father Mitch Pacwa taking a look at the developments in the Mideast yesterday with this ceasefire agreement, but now, as we just mentioned, there is a snag. Apparently, the vote on that agreement is going to be delayed. All right, so we'll talk about that with Father Mitch and get his perspective of what do we need to know as Catholics, how do we look at this, what does the Church say, and then wrapping up with Stephen Crampton. He's a senior counsel for the Thomas More Society, and they're out of Chicago. There's also the Thomas More Law Society that's in Ann Arbor. There's two of them that do great work. Well, there's all kinds of great freedom firms like this that do such wonderful work pro bono for Christians who are persecuted. Anyhow, we're going to be talking about those 21 pro-lifers that have been targeted by the current Department of Justice. All of that plus you on a Thursday morning. We so appreciate your listenership here at EWTN. We'll be right back.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I told him about the woman who came to me and said her two children hadn't spoken to each other for 2 years. Their grandma died, and she was very wealthy. She left half to each one. She said they're arguing over a commode. She said it's inlaid. Can you imagine being in hell and somebody saying to you, "What are you here for?"
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Italy aficionado Teresa Tamio's newest book is coming soon to the Ave Maria online store. In Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Teresa Tamio provides how best to navigate the most popular sites, best routes, and how to best soak in all the beauty Italy has to offer. She also shares the most inspiring journeys to make your Italy excursion utterly unforgettable. Shrines and Wonders from Catholic Connections, Teresa Tamio will be found soon at AveMariaRadio.net.
Steve Ray here. Next year's a Jubilee year, and we're going to celebrate it in Rome. But not only Rome. This is our Saints and Shrines of Italy pilgrimage, and joining us is our good friend Teresa Tamio.
Yes, Steve, fantastical. Walking through the holy doors, immersing ourselves in the deeply Catholic culture of Italy. I'll be joining you and Janet in Florence and Assisi.
Join us this May for the Jubilee year from Milan to Florence and much more, all the way to Rome.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net.
Almost 17 minutes past the hour on a Thursday morning. Great to be with you, and always great to have the one, the only Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN with us. So, Father, I immediately thought, I know we were going to talk about the upcoming inauguration on Monday and the Catholic response and probably being a lot of division and whatnot that's still going on, but this breaking story out of the Mideast, and you know the Mideast so well. You're so much time you spent there, and of course you speak the language there, and you're very familiar with it. And it was super exciting yesterday when the story broke that the ceasefire was reached. But then we see a new statement that came out. Let me read this to you. You know this, but I'll share it again with our listeners in case they're just tuning in. Israel is now delaying a cabinet vote on the ceasefire with Hamas. A ceasefire and hostage deal reached yesterday, which would include Hamas releasing dozens of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Today, the Israeli Prime Minister's office releasing a statement claiming Hamas is reneging on the understandings and creating a last-minute crisis that is preventing an agreement. I can't help but immediately think of all the families on both sides of this issue, whether it be Palestinian prisoners or the hostages. Their hearts just must be broken right now after hearing this latest news.
Of course. Yeah. This is very, very difficult, and tension-provoking. And I think there are a number of things going on at once, and this is important to remember. First of all, I heard an Israeli dad of one of the hostages put it exactly the way I would have put it. Have you ever been to the souk, the marketplace, in the Middle East? And negotiation is something that is going on. So, and I've done this myself. I'll go in, I'll say, what's this price? They'll say, no. And then I walk away and then look for a better price. And oftentimes I get it. Not always, but oftentimes I get a better price. And this is a component of negotiating. Secondly, I think it's worth paying attention to the reports coming out of Iran. Iran is declaring Hamas has won and has defeated the Jewish state. In other words, they are proclaiming a victory battle, a victory cry. And so with that as encouragement, Hamas is trying to get even more in the deal. Thirdly, I should say, I would not be surprised that, as a matter of fact, 100% sure that the Hamas negotiators in Doha, and perhaps others as well, are paying attention to the way the outgoing administration is trying to take credit and the incoming administration is trying to gain credit for brokering this peace. And so they said, oh, the Americans are fighting. So in the face of that set of arguments, they're also saying, well, now we can get a better deal. And that's what they're doing in these last few days. Now, they don't have too much time before Donald Trump is inaugurated and will be completely in charge. But there is infighting taking place, and I really have a hunch that Hamas is playing this. The way a kid gets mom to agree with him, but when dad said no, or vice versa. And then you let them argue, well, wait a minute, and see what else you can get out of it. Usually it doesn't turn out too well for kids who have sensible parents, but that may not apply here. So the parents involved may not be always so sensible. So that is another factor.
So why should we as Catholics be watching this closely? Sometimes, Father, and you know this, it's always forever changing in that part of the world. It's so volatile consistently. And we just we pray for them, and we just kind of throw up our hands and say, I don't know, I don't understand. This is the Lord of this is the area of our Lord. This is where he was born, where he was crucified, where he walked, and where he preached. And it's so important to us as Catholic Christians and all Christians, and also to Jewish people and that whole part of the world, and to Muslims. I was just going to say that. It's so the three major religions, right? Exactly, are there. So how do we look at this, and how do we pray for this? Because it's just so confusing. There's yay, it's good news, and it's like, oh, here we go again. Well, how do we look at this from a Catholic perspective, do you think?
A couple things. Something that was said by agents from the CIA of the present, I think is very important. They were claiming that Putin instigated Iran to instigate Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis to stir up trouble in Israel as a way to divert attention from the much more difficult war taking place in in Ukraine. And that now that he's gotten the North Koreans to act as his mercenaries, I don't know that North Korea has declared war on Ukraine, but they're acting as mercenaries from their regular army, showing that it's not going so well for the Russian army. So as a way to get to say to Europe and America and the other Western powers, squirrel in the Middle East, get them. And that's partly what I think is going on. Our own prayer has to be, if they are telling the facts, if they know what they're talking about, and they know a lot more than I do for sure. If they're correct that this is Putin stirring Iran, his ally, to stir up their allies, then one of the things we should be praying for is, the safety of folks on the ground, Palestinian and Israeli, who are being manipulated by world powers for completely other reasons that have nothing to do with anything. They simply are pawns that the bigger powers don't care if they lose, and they don't care what their fate is. And we need to be people who say, look, these folks who are poor especially in Gaza. That's a very, very poor area. And the people there have been destitute. But also the Israelis. I saw how the UN has food stacked and ready to go into Gaza as soon as this peace is settled. And there is a real ceasefire. But you also have to keep in mind, average Israeli citizens lost not only the initial 1,400 people, but also they are, in an ongoing way, kept out of their own houses.
Right.
And they're suffering tremendously. And both of these regular folks on the street are going through misery as part of this global realpolitik, and we need to pray especially for them.
More on this, Father. We're running out of time. We'll be right back on Catholic Connection on a Thursday. Stay tuned.
60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. This commandment is wide-ranging in its implications. It forbids us not only from committing the very act of adultery, but also other sexual sins such as fornication or premarital sex, watching pornography, and speaking lewdly. Likewise, homosexual acts and acts of masturbation are also forbidden us. And the Lord himself even enjoins us to a purity of mind, that we should not freely entertain lustful thoughts. And so it's wide-ranging, it's challenging, but it's in service of the great sacredness of human life, which comes from sexual activity. So we thank God for this great gift of sexuality, and we ask for his grace to live it with great reverence. The sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery.
For more about the 10 Commandments, visit EWTNRC.com.
Believers who respond to God's Word and become members of Christ's body become intimately united to Him, the Catholic Catechism tells us. Through the sacraments, those who believe are intimately united with Christ in a very real and hidden way. The body's unity does not do away with the diversity of its members, who engage in a diversity of functions. The unity of the mystical body triumphs over all human divisions. There are no Jews, no Greeks, no slave, no free man. All are one in the body of Christ. Christ is the head of the body of the Church, the principle of creation and redemption. We are united with Christ in his Passover. All his members must strive to resemble him until Christ is formed in them. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
28 minutes past the hour now. Catholic Connection on EWTN. Great to be with you on a Thursday, January 16th. And so Father and I were talking during the break, and he covered the situation in Israel so well and helped us focus on how we pray as Catholics. I thought, Father, since by the time we join you next week, God willing, a week from today, we will have a new president, the 47th president of the United States, Donald Trump. And I was just wondering your thoughts going into the inauguration. There'll be a lot of activities this weekend in our nation's capital, and then Monday, the whole inauguration event. Your thoughts this morning, Father?
Well, a couple things. One, I think it would be safe to say that there is a very different mood from the time of the first inauguration. I don't think there'll be quite so many of the same crazy protests that had occurred.
Where after the inauguration, Madonna was calling to blow up the White House. Remember that one? Yeah.
Oh, and burning cars. That especially a number of feminists were looking to burn up automobiles. They were doing that. They were very violent. Bless their hearts. And, this is, so I don't sense that mood. The election was so badly lost that I think people in, politics are taking a very different approach. than they had in the past. At least after the last election. That doesn't mean that they like Donald Trump at all, but I don't think they are upset and in the same way that they once were. They're not happy, but they're learning to cope with this situation. And I think it's going to be a much more peaceful time. That, I think, is going to be very key. So that is something for which I feel a certain amount of relief. The last time was very, very disordered, very unhappy, to say the least. And we can look forward to a more peaceful transition. Now, we also want to see, in the last, first Trump administration, there really was a certain amount of chaos. He didn't always have everything that well organized. I think this time he is better organized. He's got more of his people in place. He's much better organized than he was in the last term, and as a result, I think this could also be a more orderly transition on their end as well. That's a good thing. That really is a very good thing. So, we definitely want to see less chaos, more order. And the running of the government, not for party purposes, this is going to be another key element, that it's not about, promoting something for one or other party. It's rather about the issue of what are we going to do for our own nation that has a lot of hurting people. People are really finding it difficult to find housing, work, goods, food, a lot of other items that are just part of everyday life. That's no small issue. And so we definitely want to see a much better sense of, transitioning to a new administration than we saw in the past. This would be really, really good. I think it is. And again, on multiple levels, not just on the level of Donald Trump, but also on the level of his opponents / enemies. Again, you can't underestimate how inimical people are, too. So these are good things. Well,
yesterday, I don't mean to interrupt, only about 3 minutes left, and I want to get your opinion on this. Yesterday, two entities, though, that seem to be digging in their heels. Yesterday, all week long, these confirmation hearings. Just some nasty stuff, and not even asking. Some of those on the left, not even asking decent questions, just attacking, and they're so angry. You can see they're seething still from the results of the election. That's number one. Then you have the media, the legacy media, doubling down on the way they're going to cover this, and they're bringing Rachel Maddow back in for MSNBC for the first 100 days of the administration. Meanwhile, her ratings are down. The whole network is trashed in terms of the numbers, and they're digging in their heels. It's as if they don't want to hear what people say. The people who, even many, on different sides of the political aisle, who voted a particular way, they don't want to hear from anybody. They're digging in their heels, and it's their way or their highway. Unfortunately, not all are open to that peaceful transition.
Yeah, that's true. Some of God's children are just going to stay unhappy, but it's I guess okay. The glass is half. It's at least leaking. I'm not sure it's half empty, but it is leaking. And some of these folks are going to stay unhappy because they really don't like being out of power. That's certainly the case, and that's true for all these politicians, no matter what. Politicians like to be in power. They think they should be. So, that's going to be there. But and some of it was pretty nasty. But at the same time, there's also some positive stuff going on that I say, all right, well, that's a good thing. Let's see if we get them to learn to play a little bit more nicely with, again, not just getting along so they get along, but getting along because the people of the United States need them to be doing a good job for the people. That has to be the bottom line here. And I really, really want to see this go on for folks. What can we do to help the people of the country just work out a better way of helping people that are really hurting? That to me is number one. And I don't always sense they live in a world of theory quite frequently, and I don't think that's healthy.
Nope. But, what is healthy is for us to be positive and to try to be bridges and to continue to pray for our government and all of our leaders. Father, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. It'll be interesting to talk to you next week after the inauguration. Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN on a Thursday, where we do cultural connections and get his perspective on things happening out there in the world, the culture, and, of course, all things Catholic. We'll be right back on a Thursday morning. Stay tuned.
Christ is the answer, with Father John Riccardo.
John, chapter 8, verse 51. Jesus is in a discussion with some of the leaders of the Jews. They're talking about Abraham. Abraham lived 1,500 years before the time of Jesus. So in the course of the discussion, Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death." He says that often in the Gospels. "He who keeps my word or believes in me will never die." To which the Jews say, "Now we know you have a demon." And they say, "Abraham died, as did the prophets. All the patriarchs, the great men and women of the history of Israel. All these people died, and you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death? Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets who died?" And Jesus says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced that he was to see my day. He saw it and was glad." To which the Jews say, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham?" And Jesus answers, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am."
The Heart of the Interior Life with Elizabeth Jangle.
What is the fundamental direction of your spiritual life? Are you moving closer to God or away from Him? Understanding the fundamental direction of a person's spiritual life is key to discernment. Being able to identify the spiritual direction of our lives is a necessary step before beginning a process of discernment. Father Timothy Gallagher writes, Ignatius thus highlights this all-important fact. To discern correctly which spirit is working in a person's heart, and so to know what we should accept or reject, we must first identify the fundamental direction of that person's spiritual life. The first rule in St. Ignatius of Loyola's 14 Rules for the Discernment of Spirits gives us an opportunity to consider anew the direction of our spiritual journey. Take a moment to consider what is the fundamental direction of your spiritual journey.
For more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net.
Wrapping up a Thursday morning edition of Catholic Connection on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, coast to coast and around the world. And talking life this morning, a week from tomorrow, the big March for Life, and I'm very honored to be chosen again as their field reporter. So we'll be out there at the rally on the riser and I guess they're moving everything. I was talking to my producer, Holly Shannon, and she was telling me that they're moving everything closer to the monument, including the stage. So that'll be a little bit of a different location. But I'm thinking it's going to be a pretty big crowd. It was big last year. I think it's going to be larger. And among those attending will be some folks in the wonderful Thomas More Society. On the phone with us is Stephen Crampton. I know he's not going to be there, but his colleagues and some of the people that he has represented in the past may be there. But Stephen, we brought you on this morning to talk about what could happen with those folks who were placed behind bars by the Biden Justice Department and guilty of what? Trespassing. So what's the latest with those cases, and what are you hoping for with the new administration? Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, good morning. And by the way, I will be there next week.
Oh, will you? Okay, well, then let's talk.
Yeah,
let's talk.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, as you know, there were a series of these cases in which the Biden DOJ came after basically folks that were long past the trespasses, as you correctly described them, that had been dealt with on local law enforcement basis, and swooped in, and some of them, like Paul Vaughn and Jonathan Darnell, arrested at gunpoint in a SWAT team kind of operation.
Yep, I remember
and then
that.
prosecuted criminally, not only for misdemeanor face violations, but they threw in these outrageous felony conspiracy charges, which carried the maximum penalty of up to 10 years. So some of them are behind bars as we speak. We have appeals pending in 3 of those cases, all 3 of those criminal cases. And meanwhile, as you know, yesterday we filed formal petitions with President-elect Trump's team seeking full and unconditional pardons for 21 of them. So we are very hopeful, given the pro-life movement, the emphasis next week, obviously around the anniversary of Roe against Wade. What a wonderful opportunity for a man that has such an instinct for media to pardon these folks that he referred to no less than 3 times on the campaign trail. He knows what it's like to be unfairly prosecuted and persecuted by the Biden DOJ.
Do you have any understanding, Stephen, of when this could happen? Would it be quickly, do you think? Or do you think it would be around the March for Life? I mean, the inauguration is Monday, the march is on Friday. It would be very, as you said, it would be a real media moment to do that. But have you heard anything, any idea from your contacts in D.C.?
We really have not. I mean, the fact is, as you can well imagine, he is overwhelmed with folks seeking immediate action on an array of fronts. But we rely on, this guy as president, like no one in my lifetime, has kept campaign promises, right? In his campaign, he repeatedly referred to wanting to take action on day one. That's why we worked night and day to get these petitions to him in time to let his team vet them, really following the procedures laid out in the Department of Justice's own pardon attorney's office, in order that he has all the information he needs, all the background he needs to ensure himself that these, he's not letting like the illegal immigrants back on the street to commit violent crimes, right? These are such upstanding people. So we have kind of set the table for him to take that action on day one if he so chooses, but we haven't been assured by anybody on the inside yet that he intends to do that.
Talking with attorney Stephen Crampton, senior counsel for the Thomas More Society, regarding the cases of possible presidential pardons on behalf of 21 pro-life advocates who have been unjustly prosecuted, convicted, and in several cases imprisoned even by the Biden Department of Justice. So, Stephen, we know that President Trump has changed somewhat on his pro-life issues in terms of he's still going to be allowing for the abortion pill to be mailed, to be sent in the mail. He is saying, obviously, that he has moderated, of course, on the IVF issue. So there's some disappointment with the administration. Are you concerned that some of these changes with him in terms of his pro-life approach could impact your clients? Or do you think those are kind of 2 separate areas? What do you think?
I really believe, and call me naive, but I think that they are 2 separate areas. This situation with the FACE Act defendants is so closely aligned with what President Trump himself has endured at the hands of the Biden DOJ. As they say, the weaponization of the Civil Rights Division in particular of the Department of Justice, and the way that the FBI has sought out in a virtual witch hunt just as President Trump himself describes, I think rightly, his own treatment at the hands of these folks just seems to align so closely with something that's near and dear to his heart. And of course, he's often mentioned the January 6th prisoners, which also I think are political persecutions. And so this is something that just seems to me to be in a separate category for the president, and I expect and hope that he will act promptly. And look, the J6 folks, there's over 1,000, I believe, right? So to go through individually and review each one of those and ensure that these folks meet otherwise the qualifications for pardons and so forth, that's a tall order to get done by day one. By contrast, we have 21 individuals here. We put, as I say, everything together in a comprehensive packet for him. It can be reviewed in a matter of hours and ensure that he's not going to be bitten in the backside if he does release these folks. What a wonderful opportunity to deliver on a campaign promise and show also a more skeptical pro-life world, as you rightly put it, that he's serious about acting on our behalf, too.
In the case of the J6, the folks who are behind bars, there was a statement recently, I'm trying to think, was it last week or maybe the week before, where it might have been J.D. Vance, Vice President-elect Vance, who was saying that if they are guilty of violent crimes connected with January 6th, property damage and some more serious things, that those cases they're not going to be pardoned. But the ones who, for example, were there just protesting and walking through the Capitol and weren't doing anything that was physically violent or illegal, that those are the ones they're going to review right away. Am I correct in my assumption of that?
That's exactly right. And as you probably know as well, he received enormous pushback by saying that those that engaged in violence would not be pardoned, and kind of backtracked some of that on Twitter, now X. So the public's awareness and interest in these cases is extraordinarily high as well, which is another reason. Again, President Trump is so savvy on the media front, and I think he's serious about this as a matter of principle as well. But many groups have filed petitions, that is, online, just getting signatures, as opposed to doing the deep labor that we've done on our individual petitions to urge pardons in these cases. And I think the president and his team has a real ear for these requests. Moreover, on the violence versus nonviolence, of course, our people are the picture of nonviolence, unlike the mostly peaceful protests of recent years by those favoring the left on the political spectrum. Ours are wholly peaceful. There is one kind of footnote in the D.C. rescue where the clinic employees came aggressively with a broomstick, no less, at some of our folks that were trying to get into the clinic and just engage in a sit-in. But again, that is nothing like real acts of violence initiated and aggressively undertaken by the peaceful protesters themselves. The other thing that we've got going here, we are talking today, the day after MLK Jr.'s actual birthday, being officially celebrated, ironically enough, as a holiday on Inauguration Day, next Monday. Again, what a wonderful PR kind of photo op opportunity here with the man that basically made famous the sit-in, to honor those that actually engaged in nothing more than sit-ins in the pro-life context. So I think there's every reason to pardon these folks right away.
That's a very interesting analogy and a very good point, because what I was going to ask you next, Stephen, and by the way, if you're just joining us, 48 minutes past the hour on a Thursday, Stephen Crampton is a senior counsel for Thomas More Society. So when you're talking about and I'm doing the air quotes here, if you could see me, the quote-unquote crimes that these pro-lifers committed, if you look at, for example, these sit-ins, over so many decades, and you and I are old enough to remember sit-ins in college and sit-ins, and I was I have to say, even though I'm in my 60s, I was still pretty young when the Vietnam conflict broke out. But sit-ins was a normal way of expressing your concern about an issue, and it's nonviolent. It's just literally sitting in. So explain to our audience, because when we hear these people are behind bars, people automatically may get the image of, they're criminals and they must have done something wrong. But this is a very different result in terms of somebody arrested for trespassing as to the way they were punished in these different cases.
It really
correct?
is. Yes. In fact, I mean, the irony here is, and when the Biden DOJ throws these felony charges at them, all of these incidents were live streamed by the participants themselves. They weren't hiding it like, folks firebombing churches in the nighttime, by the way. What they did was they come, in most cases, right to, up next to the entrance and sit down. They pray. They sing hymns. They read scripture. When, on the rare instance, a patient approaches to try to enter, they respectfully say, we're not going to move because we don't want you to kill your baby today. And then they plead with them. They share scripture with them. They offer to pray with them. And, I mean, these are the most peaceful undertakings you can imagine. Many of the videos are available still online, the Tennessee incident being probably the most prominent. But it's extraordinary. The police themselves couldn't believe what was happening and that they were being called upon to remove these people by force. So, I mean, this is the model of what a peaceful demonstration ought to look like.
Yeah. Were you surprised when these arrests happened, or given what has happened in the past with this current Department of Justice, what was your reaction when you heard about the arrest, going back to the beginning of the story, Stephen?
It was a little of both. On the one hand, the extreme measures, like with Mark Houck, Paul Vaughn, Jonathan Darnell, where they came in with a SWAT team, just so over the top. And remember this as well.
SWAT team. I mean, I have covered so many stories with SWAT team, Stephen, and it wasn't a dad with several kids who was a peaceful protester, Right? I mean, seriously.
And here's the case. So take Tennessee and Paul Vaughn. The incident occurs in March of 2021. In June of 2022, as you'll recall, that's when the Dobbs decision was formally announced, and abortion is no longer maintained as a federal constitutional right. It's not until October of 22, 19 months after the event, at which, by the way, Paul Vaughn wasn't even arrested. He wasn't sitting in front of the door. He was just in the hallway down the way from the folks that were actually in front of the door. And here these FBI folks show up at 7 a.m. in the morning, banging on his door with the automatic weapons drawn, pointed at him, his kids out in the yard behind him. They're not even allowed to get back in the house. And they shake Paul down. His wife with a nursing baby in the back of the house, they won't even tell him what it's for. He's like, what is going on, right? And they drag him off. This is Gestapo-like tactics. It's unbelievable. So to that extreme, yes, we were surprised. And there was, to my mind, no question what they were doing was communicating an in terrorem message to the rest of the pro-life community. Don't you dare approach.
Don't you dare challenge us.
Right?
Yeah, it was all about control. It was all about fear, the fear factor and control. Stephen, great conversation. I look forward to, God willing, seeing you next week at the March for Life. We've been discussing the pro-life issues and especially a possible pardon for 21 people that were jailed under the current DOJ. Stephen Crampton is a senior counsel for the Thomas More Society. Stephen, thanks so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate you all. God bless you.
All right, God bless you too, and we'll be right back to wrap up Thursday morning edition of Catholic Connection Up. I'll let you know what's coming up on a Friday. Good stuff again tomorrow. Stay tuned.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically owned shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
When I've had enough. I ask parents, when do you decide to discipline? One of the most common answers is, when I've had enough. If discipline is designed to teach, then we need to discipline before we've had enough. We need to discipline because the behavior's wrong, not because emotionally it's pushed us to our edge. Besides, when you get to when you've had enough, you're much more likely to yell and scream and say things that you have to go to confession for. So, the suggestion is, discipline out of principle, not emotion. Principle means because it needs discipline, and I'm going to do it when I'm calm. Emotion means I'm going to be moved to do it just because I'm mad.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
We appreciate your listenership at EWTN. Coming up tomorrow on Catholic Connection, Doug Keck, of course, our Chief Operating Officer, is going to be giving us an inside look, an inside word, as we always do on Fridays, as to what's coming up. And, of course, lots going on with the big March for Life next week, so that'll be exciting. And then Fact Check Friday, taking a look at some of the interesting media stories, and how I mentioned with Father Mitch, the media are just digging in their heels, and they just won't give in terms of reality and think that everything has to be their own particular worldview. We'll discuss, and then we'll wrap up with a brand new pro-life initiative. It's going to be really interesting. It's called Praise Her in the Gates, Dispatches for a Pro-Life Nation. And considering tomorrow is going to be 1 week away from the big March for Life on January 24th, we'll preview a little bit of that as well. And don't forget to tune in to the March for Life on the internet, on radio, on television. We'll be there for you covering all the events. And we'll talk to you, God willing, tomorrow on a Friday. Ciao, ciao.
You've been listening to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Our producer is Andrew Kruchek. For copies of this program or for more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. That's AVEMariaRadio.net. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Catholic Connection.